Well, happy Father's Day. Sorry I missed it. I mean, I didn't put it in the list. Uh, Nice to see Victoria. And I don't know what everybody knows or doesn't know. I've been informed, though, that she's a star scholar at the JC, that she has an opportunity to be a teacher's aide at the JC, that her professor complimented her that she was not going to teach grade school, she was going to teach college. And so she's that smart. And they had a special dinner for her and four others out of all the JC. And so this lady is going to be something, all right. Well, she is something. And so it's nice, and it's nice to see her. In addition to all of that, it's nice to see her. The passage that's on the screen, this is by way of encouragement. There will be that generation, and it's getting close. And that's what I want to talk about. The more I talk about it, my hair stands up. What I have of it, I can feel it kind of standing up right now a little bit. Is it getting bigger? Is it covering the bald? No. Here, let me rub some of those down. Anyway, it's taken from the Olivet Discourse. So, what that happened, that's a special thing that Jesus was talking to his disciples about, about end times, about things that are going to come. And see, what happened was, they were, the disciples, they were leaving the temple area, and they were talking about how great the temple looked and all of that. And so Jesus said, well, he just made the observation. There's going to come a time, when all this stuff is, when the temple is torn down to the last rock, the last stone, there won't be two of them standing on each other. And that happened in 70 AD. Now, I know that I'm not saying anything that most of us don't know. We all know what I'm talking about, but I wanted to start with this kind of a review before I get into it. You see? And I'm not going to get into I can't complete it all in one session. And I'm watching the clock, and we're just not going to stay till 12, and that's the way. And we're not even going to stay till 11:45 either. We're trying for 11:30. There's a lot of stuff, though, a bunch of ins and outs, and can get maybe a little bit complex, but it's worthwhile taking a look at, okay? Now, anyway, the idea, that the temple was going to be destroyed, that shook the disciples. They were, what? The temple's central to their understanding of God. And they asked Jesus for more details, and his answer is in Luke 21 and Matthew 24, is recorded in both places. Now, for historical reasons, there's a reason. It's always been the position of the majority of the churches of Christ to understand these passages, those along with the book of Revelation and parts of Daniel, as having already taken place in the first and second centuries. That was the position. It was done, over with, and so there's nothing more to look forward to until Jesus actually comes back. This is the majority opinion of most of Christendom, okay? Most of the denominations, not all. But the churches of Christ specifically, haven't always been of one mind on this. Some of the churches have taken the positions that this discussion between Jesus and the apostles, along with the revelations, were to be fulfilled sometime just before Jesus comes back. Brother Diggs of the West Side congregation had believed that, and so did Brother Harris of this congregation when he was alive. See, we used to have this catalog back here in the office. I haven't looked for it for a long time. I don't know if it's there anymore. But anyway, all the churches of Christ in America were listed there. And one time when I was thumbing through it, I noticed that there was a few churches that as congregations took this outline position as a point of doctrine. They even kind of named themselves that. Churches of Christ of End Times or something. I don't remember what they called themselves, but Churches of Christ nevertheless. And so taking this, the discourse in Revelation to be both literal and to be fulfilled in the future is very much the minority of the churches of Christ. And as it happens, and you guys all know this, that I take the minority position. I think this is it. We're living in it right now. You know, not only were these prophecies to be fulfilled centuries later from when they were given, but we're actually seeing them come to pass. Whoa, this is way cool. Okay. Now, there's not as much fire in the discussions as there used to be. Man, I mean, some time back, people would hate each other over this question. It was amazing. But, you know, it's not worth arguing over. I'm not going to argue over it. You know, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen regardless. I know. And all that being said, though, see, it's now nearly 2,000 years since these prophecies were given by Jesus. And current events now show, this is it, current events show that what was predicted back then was actually nothing less than straight up reality. It's current events that are happening now. It's coming to pass now. We see it. Now, the discourse, along with Revelation and some prophecies in the Old Testament, a lot of prophecies in the Old Testament, have been partially fulfilled, and now this day they are coming to pass. Okay, they are being fulfilled in a strict literal sense. See? Now, the reason I want to take another look at these things is to give you kind of an update on a very significant developments in current events. For the reason on the screen, not to scare anybody. They're coming to pass. You know, and so Jesus says, when you see this stuff, which we are now, then lift up your heads. Your redemption is drawing nigh, draweth nigh. It's not to be afraid like the church in Thessalonica. You know, they're oh no, you know, but we're supposed to rejoice, like Jesus said. See, so anyway, when he made the statement on the screen, Jesus wasn't talking about the redemption of the cross. See, we've had that since Jesus resurrected. That's ours anyway. But Jesus meant the redemption that Paul was talking about, and when he wrote to the church in Rome, in Romans 8:23, see, and he said, not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption. And here it comes. The punchline is, to wit, the redemption of our bodies. Talking about the resurrection. The resurrection's coming. Okay. See, that's what's in view here. The good news is that at long last, the redemption of our bodies is at hand. That's what Jesus is saying. It's way cool. And he's talking to us. Now, one of the purposes of prophecy, you got to get this, one of the purposes of prophecy is to prove that the God of the Scripture is in fact God. See, it's for faith's sake. He gives us the prophecies. It's proof. That's his thumbprint. You know, here, I'm going to give you some prophecies like this, so you know that it's really me. And that's God's ID. You know, you want to see an ID? There you are. Okay, that's what it is. That's what it does. See, and so Isaiah, he points that out in Isaiah 46, 9 through 10. And it's not going to be on the screen, not going to do all that right now. But unless these prophecies come true in the physical world, how's anybody going to know that they're actually fulfilled unless you can see them being fulfilled? There's none of this spirituality stuff. You know, forget that. I mean, and, you know, it's got to be rock hard seeing it. Okay. You know, when we talk about placing our faith in God, we're talking about placing our faith in the God who brings prophecies to pass in the physical world. And that's one of the reasons that we can hang our faith on God, is because he does that. Okay. And so since God put himself out on a limb here, okay, if his prophecies don't come to pass, then he's no more God than any idol. See? Therefore, all prophecy has to come to pass. It must. It's necessary. It's got to be come to pass in a discernible form, some way where we can all look at each other and go, whoa, well, God called it on that one. You know, well, yeah, not only did he call it, I want to show you something. He didn't call it. He twisted history to make it happen. This is incredible. So anyway, the physical fulfillment of prophecy, it's money in the bank for us Christians. I mean, if any of you guys are betting people, then now's the time to put your money down on the temple being restored. Okay? This is it. Go down, over to Las Vegas or wherever they take the. Maybe you can do it online. I don't know. Use a Bitcoin. Okay. Anyway, if you have any. And so, I mean, God says it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It has to. So see, and so most of this prophecies in Scripture, they lie far out of bounds of what could be expected through chance alone. All right, these things are unlikely. A lot of, maybe most of them. Take the genealogy of Jesus. We don't think of it as being prophetic, but it is. It is. Here's this family tree, the most important human being in the history of the world, and his family tree was traced and written down, compiled centuries before he was ever born. How often does that happen? That doesn't happen much. I don't think Abraham Lincoln was, we don't know. We didn't know his genealogy before, it didn't point to him. Here he comes, that's unlikely. It's recorded, publicly distributed, studied worldwide. That's peculiar. That doesn't happen a lot. Now, here's this other prophecy. Here's this prophecy that here's this highly developed, civilized region around the Mediterranean Sea. People have walled cities and they have a worldwide trade and they've got armies and all of that. And here's this prophecy that says it was given that the descendants of some old guy, 70 years old at the time, and he has an older wife who's barren, that his descendants are actually going to conquer that land. That's outside. That's peculiar, isn't it? I mean, that would be unusual. You got to confess, that's strange. That's a strange prophecy. That's an unlikely prophecy to come to pass. Way unlikely. Happened anyway, though. We have a prophecy. That was Abraham and Sarah. We have a prophecy that these descendants, after they conquered that region, that they were going to be taken off the land for 70 years. And then after that, they'd return. That's unlikely. It happened anyway. That's a rare thing. We have a most peculiar prophecy about the ruler that's going to send these guys back to their land. See, his name is recorded in prophecy 150 years before the guy's even born. Cyrus is his name, was his name, Cyrus the Great. He's also named as the shepherd of this most strange and peculiar people, the descendants of Abraham and his barren wife, Sarah. It's these most peculiar, strange, and most unlikely series of twists and turns of history that now brings us to the image that you see on the screen. That's how we got here. A series of most unlikely events, prophesied events. See, as predicted by Jesus, the temple was destroyed in AD 70. As predicted by the Old Testament and by Jesus, the Jews were removed from their land and they were dispersed throughout the world. That happened. Also as predicted, this is unusual, that even though they were dispersed, they would still maintain their identity as descendants of Abraham throughout these centuries. Dispossessed people never maintain their national identity for very long, but these have. The Jews have. And as predicted in the end times, at the end of a period that Jesus called the times of the Gentiles, that these people, the Jews, the descendants of Abraham, would be brought back to their land, their nation would be reestablished, and it would be done in one day. That day came to pass as prophesied on May 14, 1948. Whoa, how unlikely is that? What a strange turn of events. Now, that's peculiar. The nation, though, the Jewish nation, was established on the land under the control of Israel. See, when they were established, the Jews, they only had control of part of Jerusalem. They one side of it, and the other side that had the Temple Mount, they didn't have. They didn't have that part. when they became a nation. See, and the rest of the city, it didn't come under Jewish control until the Six-Day War in 1967. Now, here's the significance of this coin. See, Israel has claimed Jerusalem as their capital from the time of its rebirth in 1948. Okay. However, for the 70 years of its existence, no nation would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Right? Instead, any nation who opened an embassy in Israel, they opened it over in Tel Aviv. Okay. And so, until President Donald Trump. I mean, see, when current events happen, there's real people involved. You know, people whose names that we may not have known, but we now know. You know, prophecy didn't name President Donald Trump like Cyrus did name Cyrus, didn't name Trump. Okay. We didn't know that President Donald Trump would have a part to play in this end time scenario. Apparently he does. Okay. Didn't know that. The coin that you see on the screen, though, it's not legal tender. It is significant. It was struck jointly by a newly organized Jewish Sanhedrin. You know, the Jewish Sanhedrin's back in operation. You might not have known that, but it is. Same one, you know, just like in the time of Christ. And there's a temple educational center. So both of these got together and they struck this coin purportedly, supposedly, in commemoration of President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and in recognition of his moving our embassy to the capital of Israel in Jerusalem. And the first and only nation so far in the world to do so. Now, you can buy the coin. You want one? They're $50 to $75, depends on the finish. Now, these things are being sold all over the world, but most of them are coming into the United States. We got a lot of interest over here in this. You know, what's going on? Eyeballs like that. Yeah, I'll buy one. I almost did. And I can't do that. No. I didn't get one. But I did bring this picture. Let me look at it. I want to see how it turned out up there. Oh, yeah, pretty good. Okay. It's enough detail to see what I'm talking about then. Now, in the center of the coin, there's these two profiles. Everybody can see there's one profile superimposed over another. And now the one in the background represents Cyrus the Great, ruler of Persia, from around 560 to 530 BC. Now, Isaiah, as I mentioned, referred to Cyrus by name about 150 years before he was born. He also predicted that Cyrus would rebuild the temple, which in fact he did. And Cyrus, he did issue the decree. He did issue the decree was recorded in Ezra, the first chapter. Now, you know who the front, profile is. That's President Trump, of course. And now, the symbol on the left side of the head of the coin, it's a lion holding a sword with a crown over it. That's symbolic of Persia. And at the right side of the coin, we all recognize as the Great Seal of the United States of America. Now, if you go back to the left side of the coin, and under the Persian symbol, it's kind of something that looks sort of like a loaf of bread. It's got a hole in it. You know, okay, that's actually it's a clay cylinder. It's called the Cyrus cylinder, and it's got writing on it, Persian writing on it, and it's actually the decree of Cyrus that conquered nations. See, and his empire were to be given the freedom to worship their own gods. See, now I understand that there's actually another one of these cylinders has been found that says the same thing. Okay, so these things apparently then were sent around to various regions. Now, Cyrus did, the Bible also notes that Cyrus did put his decree in writing, and it was referenced in 2 Chronicles 36, 22, and 23. Now, over that Persian symbol, you see an inscription, and it's written in English. Now, English is the language of our language, and it's also pretty much the language of commerce throughout the world. I mean, you can make a lot of money if you want to go to China and teach English. They'll pay you to go do that. And not only that, California English is the preferable, the regional, the region they really like. California English, that's us. Okay, this is cool. We're right in the middle of it. Okay, anyway, it occupies about the same position in the world today as the Greek language did during the New Testament times. That's why we have our earliest copies of the Bible, of the New Testament, are written in Greek. That was the language that more people knew than any other. Okay, so anyway, the inscription reads to, let's see here. Okay, and the inscription reads to fulfill 70 years, right? Okay. That number is significant in that it refers to the 70-year captivity and also to the 70 years before Jerusalem was recognized as the capital of Israel by President Trump. Now, the fact that the profile of President Trump is superimposed over that of Cyrus, that indicates that the Jews see a lot of similarity between the two. Okay. Both leaders were leaders of great nations. Both were supportive of the Jewish people. Both associated with the number 70. Okay, and I'm sure they see other things, but this is just what comes off the top of your head, my head. There's more symbolism here, though, to take a look at, and it's prophetically pertinent symbolism. If you notice the subscription at the bottom of the coin, where it says, "And he charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem." Everybody sees that down there. Okay, that's a quote from Cyrus, and it's recorded in Ezra chapter 1, verse 2. Cyrus was giving the command to rebuild the temple. Okay. Now, if you look at this symbol at the top of the coin, it's the menorah. It's a 7-branch lamp that was supposed to burn continually just in front of the veil in the Holy of Holies of the temple. This was, God said, he gave the description of it back in the Old Testament, in the first 5 books, somewhere in there, about building the menorah and where it was supposed to stand. The fire was supposed to keep going, burning continuously. Okay. If you look at the reverse side of the coin, on the other side of the screen, you're going to see a stylized image of the temple with the menorah visible through the doorway. See, and underneath there's these large letters, the temple coin. The temple coin. See, and so it's referring to that half-shekel tax that every Jewish male over the age of 20 had to pay for the support of the temple. This was in Exodus 30 and 13. Anybody's interested in the references, you can take my word for it, but you can look it up yourself. So, now, here's the deal about the coin. It is supposed to commemorate the recognition of Jerusalem after 70 years. It's a commemorative coin. President Trump here is being compared to Cyrus the Great, which according to the people who are responsible for striking the coin, which comparison, by the way, was mentioned by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister. Despite all of that, you keep in mind, see, Trump never mentioned rebuilding the temple. He never said anything about that, Well, what's all this about the temple doing on the coin? This coin isn't a commemoration. It's a good, hard shove in the direction of getting Trump to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. That's what's going on here. In fact, the Sanhedrin has spoken to both the Russian President Putin, as well as President Trump, about maybe you guys can get together and rebuild the temple as a joint effort. And they have their reasons for doing that too, which we're going to look at next week. Now, the significance of all this, it can't be overstated, see. It is that the temple is the final piece of furniture, again next week, that needs to be in place at the beginning of the tribulation. And what used to be a forlorn hope of the Jews has now become a strong political current in the direction of rebuilding. Things have changed big time. What once was just a Jewish dream has now entered into the politics of the nations. And so here's where we stand. From the time of Abraham until this day, the historical path of the Jewish people is a journey so improbable as to be classified as impossible. That can't happen. this couldn't happen. God has taken the science of the math of statistical probability, and he just tied it into knots to get us here. That's what we've seen. That's what's happening. Tied it into knots in order to bring about the current events that we see today. Now, guaranteed, if God has said the temple's going to be rebuilt, and he has, then it's going to be rebuilt. No matter what the odds. The odds have nothing to do with anything where God's concerned. And so what we're seeing now is the first beginning of a political movement towards rebuilding the temple. And we'll talk about this more next week. Now, what does all this mean to us? Well, it means that from Tuesday, it's now Monday. That's what that means. Okay? It means our redemption. The resurrection of our bodies must be close indeed. I don't think we're going to see the temple rebuilt. Maybe we will. I don't think we're going to witness it in these bodies. I think Christ is coming back. But the resurrection has to be close. See? And when these things begin to come to pass, you guys look up. Look up. We're seeing them come to pass now. Lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. It's here. And so now it's time for the invitation. I quit exactly on time. 11:30. Okay. Yeah. Did you start on? Thank you, Ben. All right. So the invitation now to the God who tells us to believe the impossible. This can't happen. You know, that's nuts. But it's God, right? Okay. To the God who makes the impossible real. That's who we're dealing with now. Okay.